Welcome back to Cynthia Untamed. This is your youthful and educational platform where we have conversations with and about children and young people in Africa. You are most welcome to Cynthia Untamed. If you are new here, you are most welcome, and please do tell a friend to tell a friend. Cynthia Untamed aims to inspire the current generation of leaders across the continent. I have done a couple of educational videos here, and I'd like for you to go and watch them, share, like, and subscribe. I'm doing a follow-up question on the video I talked about how you can be a UN volunteer. If you have not watched it, make sure you go and watch it and share, like, and send it to a friend so that they can also get tips. Now, I got a follow-up question from that video, and that is, what kind of questions do they ask you in an interview for a job at the United Nations? I'm going to take you step by step through my personal experience, because I know the questions I have been asked are not necessarily the questions that somebody else has been asked. So if you have additional questions, please do make sure that you share them in the comment section below so that other people are able to follow. My first UN interview was through the World Bank Kenya Blog for Development competition. Now, you may not know this, but the World Bank works very closely with the United Nations in ensuring that we have funding for different programs that support the most vulnerable people across the world. And the theme is to end poverty. So, in 2016, I did the World Bank Kenya Blog for Development competition, and it's basically a competition that enables young people to share their ideas on how they can solve some of the most pertinent challenges in the development sector. In that year, they asked us, as a young person, how would you create opportunities for young people in your country? I did the essay and got called in for an interview as one of the top 10 out of 800 submissions. And here are the questions that I was asked. What are the challenges that young people in Africa face? At that point, this was a very difficult question, but I later learned that this is how I could have responded to that question. You talk about the challenge and how it affects development. So for example, one of the challenges that young people in Africa face is the lack of access to education opportunities. In many communities in Kenya, you find that many children are married off early. And this means that these children will not be able to go to school, they'll not be able to thrive, they'll not be able to play, they'll not be able to learn how to read and write. As a result, they will not be able to get any jobs in the market because they don't have the soft skills, they don't have the technical skills or the social skills to get that job. The end result means that they're not able to provide for their families, and of course that results to poverty, not just for them but across the generations that follow them. How would you solve the challenges you have talked about? In this segment, you really need to talk about how that challenge has affected you or affected somebody you know and how you'd actually solve it. So in my case, having had the experience that I have now, if I was to go back to that interview, I would say communication and advocacy is a very important aspect of development. Not just because it creates visibility for the work that you do, but it also creates awareness of the issues that you are working on, and that enables governments, partners, civil society, private sector to come together to partner and actually solve these challenges, be it through raising money, be it through charity, or be it through mobilizing other investors to come in and solve those particular challenges. So for example, I run a digital platform called CynthiaUNTAMED.com where I amplify the stories of young changemakers in Africa. And on that platform, I have come to realize that there are many young people who are working to solve the development issues in our countries, but their stories are never told. Telling that story enables them to access another opportunity. For example, I was able to highlight the story of Patra Wanjiru, a student in high school who was running a business club in her school. Nobody beyond the school knew about that story. But because I wrote Patra's story, she was able to use that story to apply to the African Leadership Academy in South Africa And because of that and many other factors, she was able to get an opportunity to study at the African Leadership Academy. If you were to win this challenge, what would you do with this opportunity? Many times this question can get you off guard because sometimes many of us just want to experience the opportunity first before you can actually know what to do with it. So you always have to be prepared. In this segment, you can say, if I was to get this opportunity and go to Washington, D.C. to attend the World Bank Spring meetings, I know that I will have the opportunity to access influential leaders. And there, I will be able to talk about the pertinent challenges that young people in my community are facing. For example, there are many children who are out of school. I'd actually talk to them and tell them that they need to invest money in these communities. They need to invest money in these schools and ensure that our children and our teachers actually have a good environment, not just to teach, but also to learn. And that also includes enabling teachers to use technology. Further, I could also use my panel moderation skills to actually moderate some of the panels, because in many instances you find that there are many summits and conferences and panels happening talking about the issues that young people are facing, but you never get to hear the voice of a young person. As a person who has the opportunity and the skills to actually moderate a panel and the confidence to speak in panels, I will actually speak in these panels and raise my voice where it matters and ensure that the children and the young people who are not able to be at that conference can actually be heard. This is a funny one, but they ask a lot. Do you have a passport? To be honest, this is a very tricky question because sometimes maybe you're being interviewed for an opportunity where you'll need to travel next week. So if you don't have a passport, probably you won't get this opportunity. Then if you lie that you have a passport, guess what's going to happen? You might win this challenge and then you'll be there struggling to get a passport. But I believe the process of getting a passport at this point has actually gotten easier. Correct me if I'm wrong. When I renewed my passport about 2 years ago, it was a very difficult process at Nyayo House. But people who've applied in the last couple of months have told me that it's very easy. You just book an appointment and you get a confirmation in about 3 days. So always say, just be truthful. Say you don't have a passport, but you'll get it in 3 days, because sometimes when you lie, it actually creates a very bad impression of you. But on that note, even if you have never left this country, you have never stepped out of Nairobi, maybe you've grown up in Nairobi and you've never even been to the nearest county outside of Nairobi, you've never left that village, please get a passport. Get a passport. Stay with it. If somebody calls you today and says, we're giving you this opportunity, we like your work, we're giving it to you, this is yours, do you have a passport? You will say yes. So don't say you'll get a passport the day you'll travel. The day you will travel, the day you'll get an opportunity to travel, could be tomorrow. It could be tomorrow. And guess what's going to happen? You'll miss that opportunity because you don't have a passport. So get yourself a passport. In 2017, just around the elections in October, I was able to get an opportunity to travel to South Africa to launch the UNICEF Generation 2030 report on the future of African children. And basically, this was a report that was going to talk about what we need to do to invest in the lives of children, because by 2050, Africa will have the youngest population in the world. So we need to look at that. And they wanted to hear the voices of young people. When I applied for this opportunity, I was interviewed, and these were the questions that I was asked. How will you amplify the voices of children and young people when you get to the event? Luckily, I was already running my digital platform, CynthiaUNTAMED, at that time. So this was a very different situation from my World Bank Blog for Development competition. At the time, I was already amplifying the stories of young changemakers. So this question is very easy. I say that when I get to the summit, of course, I will interact with the other young people who are from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Nigeria, South Africa, young people from across Africa who were there. And I said I was going to interview them and actually share my experience of the summit. And that's exactly what I did. I did a lot of social media work. I was also captured on a couple of films here and there for the summit. And the other thing I was able to do was to address the media in South Africa. I believe we had Reuters, if I'm not wrong, those Reuters who came to just listen to the young people and their opinions on the Generation 2030 Africa report on the future of African children and young people. So that was a very simple answer. But if you are asked this question, make sure you're able to link it to the work that you do. So if you work in media, mainstream media, if you work on radio, if you're running a blog, if you're running a digital platform, if you're running a YouTube channel, if you're on TikTok, whatever means of communication that you have, make sure that you link it to that, because the essence of this event was actually to amplify the launch of that report. Have you participated in different voluntary activities? Yes or no? Now let me tell you, there are many young people who just sit at home. Don't do that. Don't do that. If you have life in you, if you can breathe, you are not sick, you do not have any challenges, you are fairly okay. You're not the wealthiest person, but you are okay. There's nothing in your life to complain about. Stop sitting in the house. Leave that house and go do something for your country. Do something for your country, for your community, even if it's your local church, your local police station, your local hospital. Don't even think about what I will do to change this whole country. Think about your local community, where you stay, your local estate. Leave the house and do something. So luckily for me, this question was also very easy to answer, because by then, I had been a mentor with the Equity Wings to Fly scholarship program, where I used to go to schools to speak to children about how they can excel in academics. And I used to share this from my personal experience, because the truth is I was not an A student in high school. I am one of those students who used to get E's in mathematics and chemistry and biology. But God is good. I still managed to excel well. I still managed to do well, and I joined the University of Nairobi. So I was able to share what I did. How did I manage to recover my marks from an E to getting an A in mathematics? How did I manage to move from a D in chemistry to a B in chemistry? How did I manage to move from a C minus in Kiswahili to an A in Kiswahili? So those are some of the things that I was able to talk about, and it's just a simple thing. You're sharing from your experience. If you've been getting an E in mathematics and you got an A in KCSE, surely there must be a story behind it. So take up activities like that, and trust me, you never know where they will take you. One day UNICEF could interview you and ask you whether you volunteered in your community, and you're like, I have never done anything. Trust me, you will not get that opportunity. And that enabled me to get an opportunity to go to Johannesburg, South Africa. That was the first time I left Kenya, by the way. I have mentioned this many times on this channel, but I will mention it again, that I am a youth leader at the Global Partnership for Education, and I also sit in the Young People's Action Team of Generation Unlimited. Generation Unlimited is basically a global partnership that comes together to empower young people through education, skills, and engagement. The Global Partnership for Education, on the other hand, is housed by the World Bank and is purely focused on partnership for education. So because of the experiences that I have had, having gone through an education system that has empowered me, but also empowering the lives of young people through storytelling, I have been able to identify different segments of education and skills and engagement that young people require so that they can thrive. When I was selected for these two different roles, these were the questions that I was asked. How did you start your advocacy journey? Remember, they want you to advise them on the issues that are happening on the ground. They don't know what's happening. This is somebody in New York or London who has no idea what is happening in Turkana, in West Pokot, in Nairobi. So they're asking you. So they asked me, how did you start your advocacy journey? And for me, my story was very simple, and I have mentioned this before. If you want to get the full story, do check out my story on Dadasphere. I'll leave the link in the description bar below. But basically, it's because I was talking to a youth fund ambassador about it, and I mentioned that, actually, there are many challenges that young people are facing, and this person was able to educate me about the things he was seeing at the county level. And so I talked to my mentor about it, and I was like, why don't you go and help the young people in your community? And she told me, when she interviewed the late Professor Wangari Maathai, She asked her what she would do for Kenya, and Professor Wangari Maathai told her, don't ask me what I will do. Ask yourself what you will do for your country. And it's from there that I was able now to ask myself, what do I have in my hands? I have knowledge that there are these organizations that support young people, because I used to see these organizations coming to a school to enable the most vulnerable girls across Kenya who are very bright and needy to access education. And so I wrote to them, and that is how I ended up with the Equity Wings to Fly program. So that's a very simple answer, and that's why I'm telling you, you need to leave your house. You need to leave your house and go do things outside so that you have answers to some of these questions. Why are you passionate about education and youth? In many instances, young people get scared of answering such questions because they feel that maybe they need to answer it from a very technical perspective. You need to talk about how you understand the education law and policy of your country. Kenya is trying to implement CBC, so you fear that you have to talk about what CBC is, you have to explain it. Trust me, if they wanted to know about CBC, all they need to do is Google or call someone from the government of Kenya and the Ministry of Education, and that person will give them all the information about CBC. So try and use your personal example. So like for me, I said that when I was in high school, I was not performing well and I was very discouraged. But my deputy principal, who was a very inspiring woman, actually gave me a book about women who are leaders in this country, and she gave it to me to read. And because of that, I was inspired to be a woman leader in my community. And this is the kind of teacher who would go and ensure that girls who had been called to this school and were not able to come to school were able to come. She'd contact the chief, she'd contact the local person there and find out, why is this girl not in school? I can see the admission list from the government, I can see her name, but I can see she has not reported. She would house many girls who are at risk of female genital mutilation over the holidays to stay at her house so that she would be sure that the next time they'd be able to come back to class. And that is why I'm passionate about education and youth, because it was a teacher who told me that I could be someone, I could make it in life, and that's why I want every other young person to experience the opportunity. From there, you can now talk about the education policy in your country and all the technical stuff. But start from that personal angle so that that person sees, oh yes, I feel this story. What skills do you have that you feel can be advantageous to this role? A very important question, and that's why I keep telling young people to develop themselves, because they ask you these questions because they want something new, they want something fresh. And I told them I am a lawyer who's passionate about the rights of children and young people, but I also have a skill in communication. I can moderate panels, I can speak in public, and I can create content. Here I am speaking to you. I can actually run a social media account that influences the lives of children and young people. So I'm not just a lawyer, but I'm a lawyer with a difference. So identify that one unique thing that you have and bring it to the role and say, oh, you know, I actually like how you do your advocacy, but I think this is how you can change it. From experience, this is how young people would like to receive your message, and I can enrich that by being part of this youth advisory board. The last segment of questions I will share with you is when I was interviewed to be a youth advocate at UNICEF. This came when I had just finished the university, but I was waiting to join the Kenya School of Law. There was about a 6-month, 7 gap in between my exams and joining the Kenya School of Law, but I'm grateful to God that I got this opportunity. So here are the questions that I was asked. Tell us about yourself. The easiest and the most difficult question. Please do not start saying you have 3 brothers, 2 sisters, 1 mother. Forget about those things. Tell us about yourself. You know, by the time you're going to this interview, you actually really need to know what kind of interview you are going for. So for me, I knew I was going in for a communication role that would impact the lives of children and young people. So when I was asked to talk about myself, I talked about the things about myself that would actually influence this role. So I talked about how I started volunteering in the community, how studying children and the law at the university, education law and policy, gender and the law, enabled my mind to open up to the issues that the children of this country go through. So make sure you start from there and then build it up. And then you can say, on a side note, I have 3 brothers, but please talk about the substance of it first and then conclude. What do you do now that fits into this role? Remember, I've told you this was a communication and advocacy role. So I had to bring myself into that role. And luckily, I was running CynthiaUNTAMED.com. And so I said, I have this digital platform that amplifies the stories of young change makers in Africa. And this is how it has created opportunities for young people across the continent. Aside from that, I actually go to schools to speak to children and young people about their rights. Because remember, I was actually interviewing for a role that should influence the lives of children and young people. So you have to bring yourself into that role and show that you have the knowledge and you have the skills, even if it's not the best skill. Because sometimes we tend to think that they want somebody who's the pro. You maybe produced videos for Safaricom and corporates. At that level, at that entry level, trust me, they were just looking for somebody with passion, but also the ability to learn and somebody who had a couple of skills. So make sure you open up about all that you know, and you just never know, it could be yours. What will you do differently after observing the work that we do? Please make sure that you actually do research on the organization that you are going for an interview for. Because, for example, you've gone for a UNICEF interview and you start talking about women. Well, we do work with women because it's children and their mothers. But the primary mandate is the children. If you are going to UN Women, it will be primarily women. If you are going to UNICEF, it will be primarily children and their mothers. Do you get that kind of difference? So they'll ask you, what will you do differently that can actually bring a change to this role? And I remember for me, I said that, yes, the work is good, but sometimes the young people on the ground don't feel it. They want to have conversations with you. Personally, I would take initiative when I was still at the university to join Twitter conversations that were being done by UNICEF. So I remember when I was in university around in second year, there was this campaign called End Violence, where Janet Mbugua, the broadcast journalist, was actually like a champion for that role, and they'd do a couple of Twitter chats. So for me, I'd get into that conversation and join it because I had the initiative to do it. But I know many young people sometimes don't have the initiative, or sometimes they don't have the financial muscle to do it. Probably they don't have internet, they don't have electricity, they don't have smartphones, they don't have all these things. And sometimes they just don't have the knowledge that they could actually do such a thing. So I told them if I could actually be the one hosting these chats, because you see, if they see me hosting it, if I talk about it on my personal platform that I'm going to host a chat, then young people will be like, oh, it's being run by a young person. Let's engage. And for me, engaging and having conversations with young people on the ground was so important because, like I told you, I had seen many young people doing great things, but nobody would tell those stories. When I would go to mainstream news, nobody tells those stories. Well, a few people do, but it's not really like the headline. Like if you wake up, that's what's on top of the newspaper. So for me, I think I wanted to have different conversations with young people. Remember, I was having an interview on a communication role. If you are doing an interview on another role, the answers you'll give will be very different. You're not going to talk about Twitter chats. If you're going for an interview in an emergency section, you're going to talk about very different things from those that you talk about when you're going for a communication role. So make sure you identify the role you are going to be interviewed for and then link it from there. When will you be available? Please be available the soonest time possible. Personally, I said immediately. Luckily, I had finished uni. I had just done my exams when I was doing that interview. I think I'd done my exams, I think about 2 weeks before that interview. And I knew I was meant to join the Kenya School of Law the following year in February. So I said, even tomorrow, I'm available even tomorrow. Well, they called me back after 1 month, but it was okay. At least I was available at the earliest date possible. So don't say you'll be available next year. They're not going to wait for you. Lastly, do you have any questions for us? Please do not say no. This is a mistake I made when I did the World Bank Kenya Blog for Development competition. The country director then, dear Hetu Gaye, asked me, do you have any questions for us? And I said no. I said no. But of course I learned with time that if you're asked, do you have questions for us? Please say you have a question. Even if you are not expecting it, ask something. Ask what is the culture of this organization. Ask about maybe something you saw in the newspaper that's related to that organization. Ask something. Trust me. For me, let me tell you, at that point I didn't have a question, but I'd already learned my lesson. When you are asked whether you have a question, please say you have a question. So immediately I just said the first thing that was in my head. I've told you I just finished university. So I was like, when I was at the university, I studied a unit called Children and the Law. How would you like me to use my knowledge of that unit to actually implement the work that you do? That is the first thing that came out from my mind, but well, at least I asked a question. So please come up with a question. You need to think on your feet. Thank you so much for staying to the end of this video. I hope that I have answered some, if not all, of the questions that you may have. If you've ever done an interview at the UN or any other organization, please do let me know what kind of questions were you asked. Comment in the comment section below. A call to action. On the 11th of September, I will be joining a panel where we will be talking about diversifying your career portfolio together with Centonomy. Some of the other speakers will be Waihiga Mwaura, Mwenesi Musalia, Sharon Mwangi, and Santa Ndirango. We'll be talking about how you can ensure that you are flexible in any work environment. If you'd like to be part of this event, make sure you sign up in the comment section below. And as usual, tell a friend to tell a friend, and I will see you in the next episode.